Hey guys, Miss Shelly here for our next lesson. We are going to move into topic 5, lesson 2, which is analyzing linear associations. I think you're going to like this lesson too. It's going to be pretty easy like last lesson. So, speaking of last lessons, let's review some associations that we learned last lesson. Look at Miss Shelly. She can't focus today. There we go. The pen was messing up. So let's do some association review. Right here, our very first one we're going to take a look at is our positive association. All of our dots are going in a positive uphill motion, so those are going to be positive, almost like a roller coaster. They're all like on that upward slant. Next, we have what happens when the roller coaster hits the top and goes down. That's our negative. That's where all of our dots start high and go low. And then we have our no association. That's where our dots are just all over the place going crazy. So just a quick review before we dive into today's lesson. So let's go ahead and look at our next slide. All right, Michelle's got to change some colors. We got to have some fun colors up in here. All right, let's do some bright green today. Let's also do a fun bright pink. And then our third color, if we need it, will be this blue. So let's take a look at Georgia. Georgia and her classmates are measuring their height and arm spans. Now we have all of their data right there in our table. So we're going to have 3 steps that we want to do. The first step is we want to plot. Now to save a little bit of time, because we all know how to plot, we've gone ahead and plotted all of our points right here. So if you look at the graph, you'll see that everything has already been plotted. So that step is done. Now we can move on to step 2. Now, step 2 says draw a line that passes through the middle of the plotted points. This is what we call the trend line. So you don't want to go straight from 0. Okay, your trend line does not have to start from 0. You want it to go as much as you can in the middle of your point. So we're going to estimate that our trend line is going to be about here. So our trend line's about there, okay? That's right, almost right in the middle of all of our points. So our trend line is the direction things are going. So in our arm span and height comparison graph right here, we see that the trend line is going upwards in a positive motion. So that is all trend line is you're just going to actually draw a line so you can better see the direction of your points. So let's look at another example. The Johannessons own an ice cream shop near the beach. The scatter plots show their sales by daily high temperature. They compare their sales by daily high temperature to the number of beachgoers by daily high temperature. So, 2 steps that we want to do in order to determine if our trend is strong or weak. The first thing we want to do is we want to draw a trend line. So we're going to look at my ice cream sales first. And like I said, your trend line, you're just going to do the best you can to get in between. Oh, I don't like that one. You may always do it in pencil so that way you can kind of redo it. That's as straight as I could get on this. Okay, and then I'm going to do another one. Remember, your trend line doesn't have to start at 0. Your trend line is going to go in the direction of your plots. So for this one, oh man, this one's hard because they're so close. We're going to estimate my trend line right a little lower, right about there. Now, here you can see we have 2 different types of trend lines. Right here in my ice cream sale trend line, my dots are a little bit further spaced than over here on my beachgoers. And my beachgoers, they're all super tight with that trend line. This is what we do to go on to step 2, is determining if the association is strong or weak. If it's strong, like in beachgoers right here, the points are close to the trend line. So we can see in our beachgoers, all those little plot dots are super, super close to our trend line. It was almost hard for us to do our trend line. But if we come over here to our ice cream sales you can see how they're all kind of spaced out kind of far. I mean, some of them are really spaced out. That means that it is a weak association, okay? So it's weak. Your best kind of trend line that you want would be a strong trend line. A weak is going to say that there may be some possible outliers, whereas a strong trend line tells you that everything is good, it's super close. That's what you more want if you're from a business standpoint. All right, so now let's go and let's play a little game. I like to call it linear or non-linear. Bum, bum, bum. All right, so our first graph, we have time versus height. Is this linear or is it non-linear? Well, if I take a look at my graph, I'm just going to kind of make a trend line based on my dots, and my trend line is going to kind of go curve downwards. So what do you think that means if it curves downward? Do you think it would be linear or non-linear? Well, think back to the last topic we talked about. In order for something to be linear, it needed to be a, hopefully you all just said, straight line. So when I'm looking at my first graph, my time versus height here, I see that my trend line is not straight. So therefore, it would be non-linear. Okay, let's take a look at example A. First thing I want to do is I want to kind of draw my trend line. Remember, do the best you can at drawing these trend lines. Well, one, that's a straight line. So we know that it's going to be linear, but now let's look at some more things. Let's see, is it a positive or a negative linear association? Well, we know it's going in an upward motion, like when you're on your roller coaster, you're going up, so that must mean that it's positive. Now let's also take a look at how close are those. Let me redraw that trend line so we can really see if it is in fact close. I'm going to do the best. All right, so is this a strong or weak association? Well, all my little lines right there are super, super close. A lot of the time, they're almost on the trend line. So we're going to say that this is a strong, positive, linear association. Let's look at example B. Let's draw my trend line and see how it goes. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw my trend line, and my trend line has kind of taken a curve and then connected itself. So my trend line is not straight. So if it's not straight, that must mean that it is non-linear. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to number C. Let's see. Well, I'm gonna draw a trend. Okay, well, I kind of can't draw a trend line, right? Because look at all those dots. They're all over the place. All right, so all of my dots are all over the place. What kind of association is that? Of course, we know it's non-linear because it's not a straight line, but we also talked about the associations last class. Remember what kind of association it's called when your dots are all over the graph? It is a no association. So for that one, we don't actually have to put that it's non-linear. We just have to put no association. All right, guys, and that is all of our lesson. Now let's do some practice problems so we can get even better at this. So let's take a look. Our first practice problem says, describe the association between the two sets of data in the scatter plot. All right, so remember, in order to figure out my association, I need to draw my trend line. So I'm going to estimate my trend line is right about here. All right, so I have my trend line. Is it positive or is it negative? It's positive because it goes up, like if you were going up on a roller coaster. So I can already answer that. It's positive. Now I need to figure out, is it strong or is it weak? Are my lines far apart and weak, or are they close together and strong? Well, let's look. It looks kind of like, well, my lines aren't all that close. I got majority of them, most of them are actually kind of far. So since it's not really close to my trend line, this is going to be weak positive. All right, so now let's take a look at my second example. It says, describe the association between the two sets of data in the scatter plot below. So I'm going to look at this. I'm going to draw my trend line. It looks like it goes this way and then that way. Well, we got a problem, don't we? Yeah, our problem is that trend line ain't straight. If we don't have a straight trend line, what do we have? We have nonlinear association because it's not straight, so it can't be linear. All right, guys, I bet you're saying, Miss Shelley, this is so easy. And that's what I love to hear, or not hear because I can't actually hear you saying it. All right, so now let's take a look at this. I have a graph. I have a bunch of different lines on it. It says the scatter plot shows the average height of people ages 2 to 12 in a certain country. Which of the lines shown is a reasonable trend line for the scatter plot? All right, now some of these are kind of hard to see, so I'm going to take and make my dots even bigger so I can kind of see them. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to start first and go through and eliminate lines. Looking at my dots, I can tell that they all go in an upward motion, so that must mean that it's positive. So my one negative line over here, W, that bad boy is out. He's gone because I know my association is positive. So now let's take a look at H, P, and T. So if I look at where my dots are, let's first start with my very first one, T, that bright pink line. Now, I mean, the T goes close to 2 of the dots, but there's still 4 other dots that it doesn't come anywhere near. So because it doesn't come anywhere near those 4 other dots, I'm going to say that T would not be a good estimation for our trend line. Okay, so now let's go to P. All right, well, P's right here. P's close to all of the lines, that blue line. So I think P would probably be pretty good. Let's just double check and make sure that H isn't better than P. So H, we actually looks like we might have the same problem we had with T. It's close to 2 of the lines, but that's still missing 4 other lines. So H isn't going to be very close either. So if I had to say and guess my best estimate would actually be that P, oops, I went over that line. P would be the best, most reasonable trend line for this scatter plot. All right, let's keep moving on and do some more practice. It says, does the scatter plot show a positive, a negative, or no association? All right, so first thing we need to do is we need to draw our trend line. I'm going to draw my trend line. I think that's right about there. I don't know why it got so small. Let's see if I can trace over. I think that's a pretty reasonable trend line right there. So is this a positive or a negative association? Hopefully you just said negative. Now let's take it a step further and let's see, is it a strong or weak association? Well, if I zoom in, all those dots are really close. I would have to say that this would be a strong negative association. All right, guys, y'all are crushing it. Let's keep going. Determine whether a scatter plot of data for the following would show a positive, a negative, or no association. Time watching television and time studying. All right, so let's just, so we can kind of see this a little more, let's graph it. Okay, so I got my graph here. Let's say we'll call this one down here TV, and we'll call this one studying, or study. So if I spend a little time watching TV, but a lot of time studying, my point would be there. If I spend a little more time watching TV and a little less, I would spend a little less time studying. If I spend even more time watching TV, then that only means less time studying. And you can kind of see how this goes. The more TV I watch, the higher my numbers are getting, the smaller my studying numbers are getting. So if I drew my trend line, then that would make my trend line negative because it is going in a downward motion. So it's a negative association to spend more time watching TV than studying, which we all know that. We know the more TV we watch, the less time we can study. And we have all the studying for math. All right, guys. So let's take a look at this one. A sociologist is studying how sleep affects the amount of money a person spends. A scatter plot was made showing the results of the study. What type of association exists between the amount of sleep and money spent? All right, so let's draw that trend line. So I'm going to come here. My trend line's going to be right about here. What kind of trend line is that? Is it positive, negative, or no association? It would be negative. Good. All right. Just a couple more problems. We're crushing this lesson. I bet we like it. It's kind of fun, I think. All right. So last two problems we're going to look at today. The first one says, describe the relationship between the data and the scatter plot. Whenever it says describe the relationship, that means it wants to know, is it positive, negative, or no association? And finally, it wants to know, is it linear or nonlinear? And then it wants to know, is it weak or strong? So let's start off first by finding out if it is positive or negative. In order to do that, I need to draw my trend line. So I'm going to draw my trend line right here. So is my trend line positive or negative? It would be negative. So we know it's a negative association. It is a straight trend line, so that would be linear. And then finally, let's take a look. Is it strong or is it weak? Well, all of the dots are pretty close to that line. So when you have close dots, that means you have a strong linear association. So the data in this scatter plot is a strong negative linear association. Let's take a look at our last example today. Describe the relationship between the data and the scatter plot. So the first thing we need to do, like always, is we need to draw our trend line. So I'm going to draw my trend line, which, has taken quite a little turn. Is that a straight line? Nope. So what happens when we don't have a straight line? Can it be linear? It cannot. So therefore, this one would just be non-linear. All right, guys, and that's it for the lesson. That's all we're doing. Super easy, right? So what I want you to do now is hop on back over to Teams, and I want you to complete today's assignment. Just like last class, this assignment is going to be interactive. So it'll require you to move circles, type in answers, and it'll even have you move boxes to different places. So, like always, if you have any questions, please do not wait until Wednesday to reach out to me. Please reach out to me anytime. I'm here for you. And most importantly, I miss you. Oh, I miss you so much, guys.